African Americans have a very proud legacy of service. I think that's part of our history, part of our heritage.
From Bunker Hill and the forts of South Carolina to the mountains of Afghanistan, African Americans have served with honor throughout our history. Black soldiers helped bring peace to the plains and defeat fascism in Europe. They charged up San Juan Hill, shot down Japanese Zeros at Pearl Harbor, and aimed for new heights at Tuskegee. By the end of the 20th century, an African American had risen to command the mightiest military force in the world. But African Americans have also had to fight for their right to defend their country and to receive fair and equal treatment in the military.
It's a challenge, and if you succeed, you come out stronger.
The legacy of their struggle and of their courageous service helped our nation realize its highest ideals of freedom.
Because of the people who served, I'm able to sit here and talk to you right now and breathe this air of freedom.
One of the first casualties of the War of Independence was Crispus Attucks, a black merchant seaman killed in the Boston Massacre of 1770. Slaves and free black men fought together in the Continental Army, but after the Revolution, African Americans were largely barred from serving. Some ignored the ban and fought valiantly in the War of 1812. Among the most famous black units of the Civil War was the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, whose heroic assault on Fort Wagner in South Carolina became legendary for the display of bravery against all odds. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation prompted thousands of freed and escaped slaves to fight in the Union Army and Navy. Their brave efforts helped to defeat slavery and gain the vote for African Americans. After the war, the Army maintained a number of black units. In the West, they helped preserve order on the lawless frontier. Native Americans called them Buffalo Soldiers. Among their feats in the Spanish-American War, the all-black 10th Cavalry Regiment assaulted San Juan Hill. With America's entry into the First World War, heroic units of black soldiers included the 369th Infantry Regiment. Known as the Harlem Hellfighters, they served on the front lines longer than any other American unit. They also introduced the French to Le Jazz. A little over 20 years later, thousands of African Americans served courageously. During the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Dory Miller, an African American Navy steward, manned a machine gun to shoot down Japanese Zeros. African Americans continued to serve heroically during World War II, although in segregated units. Nonetheless, the barriers were slowly being broken. Black women were now able to enlist in the armed forces, and the number of black officers was increasing dramatically. Benjamin O. Davis Sr. had become the country's first African American general in 1940. His son, future Air Force General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., commanded the 332nd Fighter Group, also known as the Tuskegee Airmen. The 332nd had a perfect record during the war. They never lost a bomber that they had under escort to a German fighter. Their outstanding performance helped to bring an end to segregation in the military. In 1948, President Truman issued an executive order directing the military to give all soldiers equal treatment and opportunity.
There is no justifiable reason for discrimination because of ancestry, or religion, or race, or color.
By 1954, the Army had become the first major U.S. institution to integrate. A decade later, during the Vietnam War, blacks and whites made up an integrated fighting force. Joe Nguyen is a veteran of the Vietnam era. Today he works with two organizations as an advocate for business opportunities and minority rights for veterans. Joe remembers the early 1970s as a time of challenge and change.
We were coming off of that period of the late 60s, the Black Power movement, peace movement. I would have to say there was racial tension, not only in Vietnam, but at many of the bases stateside as well. We wanted more civil rights, fair and equal opportunities. Same type of individuals who are challenging you at home are challenging you in the military.
After Vietnam, black men and women volunteered in large numbers, and African Americans were rising in the ranks. Samuel Gravely, first African American admiral in the U.S. Navy. Frank E. Peterson, Jr., first African American